Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Gramm, and joining me today on the line, we have a special guest. He is fresh off his Glory 30 welterweight contender tournament victory. He is Richard Abraham. And Richard, thanks for joining me here on Beyond the Cage.
Thanks, Jim.
Now, of course, Richard, in this tournament, you could potentially face up to three different opponents. You already knew you were going to face Casey Green, but were you worried about any of the other competitors in this tournament?
No, I know they all train hard, and they're not at that level by accident. They're there because they're good, and I know my ability and I know my skill, and I'm very confident in what I do and how I perform.
Of course, you already knew you were going to face Casey Green in the first round matchup with Morales and Ambang in the other one, and with the kind of prestige of Casey Green a little bit there, did you feel that if you could get by him that the final was going to be a little easier for you?
I don't really see, like, when I was just looking at it, I just look at it one fight at a time. I look at, get by Casey, and then I'll worry about whatever I got to worry about then. I did figure it was going to be Francois, but my whole goal and focus was on Casey. So, you know, I knew Casey was the favorite coming in, and you know, I knew I had to perform, and I felt like I prepared well enough to get past him.
Now, looking specifically at the Casey Green fight, of course, a little taller and a little longer than you. So, were you worried at all about trying to get inside on him, considering the height and reach disadvantage that you had?
I've been fighting tall guys my whole career, so there's nothing new. You know, I fought a guy that was 6'7" before. I mean, I fight guys 6'1" pretty consistently. So fighting taller people is nothing new. I know I have to get inside and you know, take away their reach, and I like to bang, so I don't have no problem getting inside. I know I might have to take a punch or two to get in, but I'm okay with that.
Now, in your preparation for this fight, Richard, were you preparing to fight 6 rounds, or were you worried about just the 3 there with Casey and worry about the other 3 later?
Every fight camp, every fight, I prepare to fight an army. I prepare myself to fight forever. It's not just 6 rounds. I don't think of it 6 rounds. I think of just being prepared to go out there and perform for as long as need be. Whether it's 3 rounds, 6 rounds, 20, 30 rounds, it doesn't matter to me. My mind is to get my body tuned to the best of my ability and to perform for as long as I need to.
Now, of course, in the final, you took on Francois Ambang. Very close fight, but you were able to get by him. And did he do anything to surprise you there in the tournament final, Richard?
Not really. He was, you know, Francois is a different guy, tough guy. You know, I watched the fight. I mean, I didn't think it was as close as like, you know, that people say it was. I only think the second round could have went to him. I feel like that could have went either way, the second round. You know, I blocked a lot of his shots, and even watching it multiple times at home, I was adding up the shots, you know, and the clean shots landed. I blocked the majority of his strikes. I landed a lot of clean right hands, a lot of clean shots, definitive shots. And even in there, as we were mixing it up and fighting, he knew, and I knew that I was ahead on the scorecard. So, and you know, energy-wise, I didn't really feel like, and when I hit him with some good right hands, I didn't feel like I could have put him down. So I knew I just had to get in there and score some points. And if the knockout came, it came, but I definitely just needed to outwork him.
When it went down and the judges made their decision with your tournament final there against Ambang, it ended up being a split decision. Did that surprise you at all?
No, I'm not really surprised. You know, I've been doing this not too long, but 7 years now, and I've been on some bad ends of calls, and anything is really possible. It's hard to say what the judges see. You know, it's hard to say who's the favorite or if the judge likes that guy or whatever the case may be. You know, I felt like I won the fight pretty clearly. I thought definitely 2 rounds to 1, maybe even 3 rounds, to 0. But like I said, you never know until they announce it and that the ref raises your hand. Then you're the winner.
Of course, this tournament win for you guarantees you a spot in a future welterweight title contenders tournament, which would be fighting for a shot at the welterweight title. They are going to have one coming up in a few weeks there at Glory 31. The field has already been announced, but has Glory tried to contact you at all and told you to stay ready just in case one of those 4 gentlemen drops out?
Yes, a little bit, but I'm actually getting married August 4th through. We're going. My fiance, calling my wife, but we are going to Bora Bora for 2 weeks in the beginning of August. So obviously my focus now has changed. To dedicate this time and prepare for this wedding, and I'm getting married on the beach, so got to get rid of my gut again. Got to look good,
Well, congratulations then on the pending nuptials then, Richard.
Thank you.
Looking over the tournament field, though, for Glory 31, do you have a favorite, or who do you think's going to come out and get a title shot there at Nikki Holtzkin?
I'd like to say Myrtle, but Myrtle's last couple performances weren't the best. Maybe he's just kind of going through a little, spot in his career right now. I mean, all the guys are good. If Myrtle just shows up and bees himself, I don't think he'll have a problem winning.
Since they're having a welterweight tournament in a few weeks, do you think your next fight will just be another fight, or do you think that you'll wait until they have another title contender tournament?
I'm not a picky guy. I'm a guy that just loves to fight. I don't really have aggression towards anyone. I don't have to be mad to fight. My best friends, we punch each other in the face pretty regularly. I'm a guy that just loves to fight. I love to compete. I really believe it's just like a game of chess, except it's just with your body. And whatever Glory wants me to do or whoever they want me to fight, as long as they just have me fight shortly after, like October, late September, preferably October, I'm going to be a happy guy.
I want to go back a bit, Richard, to your last fight at Glory 27, which, of course, was in your hometown of Chicago. Much like a lot of your friends and family, I was there in attendance as well, and I was just wondering, what was it like being able to compete on a stage like Glory there in front of your hometown there in Chicago?
Yeah, it was the same. It was definitely a goal of mine. Always wanted just to put on a good performance in front of my hometown crowd against a very good opponent. And Pavel was Jacek, or I believe I pronounced his name right, is a very strong opponent, a very good opponent. And the fact that it was in my backyard was even better. And that was the first time in 31 fights that I competed at home. And we sold a lot of tickets. I had everyone there, and I delivered that night. And it was a great feeling. It was a great feeling of a lot of years of hard work and dedication, and with all my friends and family being able to see all my dedication.
I wanted to get your thoughts on this because it happened after Nikki Holtzkin's last fight and win over Congolo. He called out current Glory color commentator Joseph Valentina, who is a former welterweight champion himself. And I was wondering, do you think that might be next for Nikki? And what do you think about a possible comeback and maybe a guy you can compete against in the future in Joseph Valentina?
I like Joe. Joe's I think he's a great guy. He's a handsome fella. He's I admire his fighting style and his ability. But the thing is, I had a problem. I was that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Joe is you can only get hit so many times. Muhammad Ali just passed away, and God rest his soul, and he had Parkinson's. You can only get hit so many times in the head before your brain kind of shuts down a little bit. No one wants to end up like that. And, I hope that I can stop doing this before it's too late for me. And, Joe, he had concussion syndrome for like a year and stuff. And, you don't want to keep pushing that envelope. And whatever Joe does, I'm going to support Joe. I think he's made the right decision about just stepping back and hanging it up. And, but that was my issue with Nicky. Maybe he was just doing it to get around or not. But, to me, it's, that's kind of overstepping that boundary. Kidding around with someone that he's a fighter. Joe would love to compete, but you also have to think about your health and the quality of life. That's the biggest thing. You have to think about a quality of life, and that's what I believe Joe is doing. And when Nicky kind of touched on that subject, I felt that was wrong.
Going back to Glory 30 for just a second here, Richard, wanted to get your thoughts on some of the other action that took place there in Los Angeles. Wanted to get your thoughts on the awesome knockout that Gregorian had over Dihame. And have you seen too many knockouts like that, Richard? Guys just falling flat on their face on the canvas like that?
Goes an airplane mode? Yes, I have. I watch a lot of Thai fights. And, they have a lot of Thai fights in the stadiums. They have a head kick knockout bonus. No fancy, just a head kick knockout bonus. I think it's like 10,000 baht. But I've seen a lot of head kicks like that, and it didn't surprise me. Murat is a monster. I mean, he is. I've been following him for quite some time now, and he is his style. He is just, he puts it together well. He throws combos. He mixes up levels. He's a very, very strong fighter, and Dihame is very good as well. But I feel like Murat was on a different level.
Now, of course, the main event of Glory 30 was Simon Marcus against Dustin Jacoby for the middleweight title. Dustin being a very big and strong middleweight, but he wasn't able to counter the speed and footwork there of Simon Marcus. And was that kind of how you thought that fight would play out there, Richard?
That was really no surprise to me. Simon Marcus is a monster. I mean, that guy, he's the only guy that I know of that he'll go to China, and China will book him 2 fights in the same night, and he's not in the tournament. They just book him a fight at the beginning of the show and at the end of the show. It's not a tournament. That's unbelievable. The guy goes over and fights the toughest dudes, in foreign countries where if you don't dominate them, you're not getting the decision. So he's been with such high-level dudes for so long. No offense to Jacoby, he's definitely earned a spot to get that shot. It's just, he's just not at that level, and Simon knew that, and that's why Simon, he went out there and toyed with them, and wasn't worried about it. And then as soon as he felt exactly what Jacoby had and his power-wise, he knew he could handle it. He wasn't worried at all. Then his hands went down, his head movement was good, and he just went in there and had a good time.
I wanted to get your thoughts, Richard, on Bellator's kickboxing organization, which is set to have kind of their mini second event at Dynamite 2, which will be half MMA and half kickboxing. And I was wondering your thoughts so far on Bellator kickboxing, and is there any interest, or has there been any interest, I should say, from Bellator in terms of potentially signing you to fight for them in the future?
Yeah, I talked with Bellator a little bit before I signed with Glory. Glory's been the leader in the whole thing, and Bellator was kind of taking off, and I kind of seen Bellator doing that from the moment they kind of teamed up with Glory. I felt like Bellator was going to try and make a jump, and maybe they wanted to do a little dry run with Glory, and then all of a sudden there's been a Bellator kickboxing, and obviously now there's a Bellator kickboxing. And, I think it's great. I think more kickboxing is better. I think stand-up fighting is where it's at. I think it's much more entertaining. I am personally not a huge fan of MMA. Those guys work hard. It's just, fun and all. It's good. It doesn't interest me like kickboxing does, or Muay Thai, or boxing. I'm a stand-up guy. I like to stand up, and that's where my passion is. But I think Bellator, having the show, I would like to see where they are in a year or two. And, I would love to fight for them too. It's just, I'm not doing this obviously forever. No one can. And I would just like to compete all over the world in different organizations, and one thing that I like to do is I keep my fight gloves from every fight that I've been in, and I just want to keep adding up fight gloves.
Now, do you have a display for those gloves, or you just kind of put a nail in the wall and hang them off of that?
I just kind of put a nail on the wall and hang them up by the strings. I mean, I got like 30 pairs of gloves. So I mean, I collect gloves like people collect shoes. I just love boxing gloves. I just, especially in the gloves I fought with, a lot of them I don't even use again, or I might hit pads with them a little just to wear them. But there's just a little like memorabilia that I like to keep.
Now, do you keep anything else from your fights, like your walkout shirt or your shorts or a poster or anything like that?
Oh yeah, well we with sponsors and stuff, we always have like new custom shirts that we come out with, and so I always obviously say the shirts. The shorts, for the most part, I used to always make a new pair of shorts for every fight, and it kind of got like I was hanging too many shorts on my wall, so I was like, okay, we need to relax with the shorts for a little bit. So kind of been using the same ones for the last few fights now.
All right, I'll get you out of here with this, Richard. Of course, earlier you mentioned you love to fight all over the world and for different organizations and stuff like that. So is there any place that you have yet to fight in that you would like to?
I was just the other day I got offered to fight in Hong Kong, but it's at the end of August. I get married and stuff, and I got offered to fight in Hong Kong, and it's actually a cage Muay Thai fight, and I am very fascinated by that. I would love to fight in MMA gloves, like a Muay Thai fight, like do like a cage Muay Thai fight, preferably down in Australia. I would love to go out to John Wayne Farr's cage CMT and fight out there. That would always be a goal of mine. Just fighting in little gloves, and because I like to hit hard, and especially my boxing, I just feel like that'd be a lot of fun.
Once again, he is Richard Abraham. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Muay Thai Chicago. And Richard, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and look forward to when you return to the Glory Ring later this year.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a good day.
That was Richard Abraham right here on Beyond the Cage. Stay tuned for more of our program as we talk about Brock Lesnar's UFC return, the banning of Ariel Helwani from the UFC, and of course our recap from UFC 199 in just a few seconds. So stay tuned. Thanks. Hi everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host Jim Graham, and on today's show we're going to talk about the return of Brock Lesnar to the UFC, the Ariel Helwani situation, and more major headlines in the world of mixed martial arts. I will also interview a Glory kickboxer, Richard Abraham, who is fresh off a tournament victory at Glory 30, up-and-coming mixed martial artist and kickboxer Brooke Mayo, and of course recap the fights that happened inside the cage at the Forum in Los Angeles from this past weekend for the UFC 199 pay-per-view. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham, and going solo once again for today's show. But very excited for today's show. A lot of stuff to talk about, and we're going to start off the show with some major headlines here in the world of mixed martial arts. Once again, as I mentioned, the Richard Abraham video, again, thanks to Richard for coming on the show. You saw that interview just before I started live here on YouTube, youtube.com/BeyondTheCagePodcast, if you haven't subscribed already. And to end the show, the last thing for the show will be the other interview I mentioned, the Brooke Mayo interview, that coming right after my recap of UFC 199. So thanks to Richard and Brooke for coming on the show. And once again, just to reiterate, you can follow Richard on Twitter and Instagram at Muay Thai Chicago, and you can follow Brooke on Instagram at bmayo1313. The major news first starting off with Brock Lesnar. The return of the former UFC heavyweight champion. Has been a while since he has fought. And not only did the UFC announce his return at the UFC 199 pay-per-view with a promo, at that point in time they hadn't announced his opponent. It was happening Tuesday on SportsCenter that Brock Lesnar went on to announce that he would be fighting former Pride FC fighter and, of course, K1 World Champion Mark Hunt for his return bout to the UFC. Lesnar has not fought in the UFC since losing to Alistair Overeem all the way back at UFC 141. Now, of course, he's currently competing for the World Wrestling Entertainment Organization, doing pro wrestling as he did before he went to the UFC, and he will be making an appearance, whatever that means, at SummerSlam, which, if you don't follow pro wrestling, that's one of the bigger events there that pro wrestling has. And a couple weeks ago, the UFC told Mark Hunt to stay ready. Most people thought that meant possibly as an injury replacement for Cain Velasquez, who has known to be injured. However, that may have not been the case all along, as Mark Hunt now will be taking on the former heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar, and it will serve as the night's co-main event of the evening, taking the place of the interim featherweight title fight between Frankie Edgar and Jose Aldo. So that will still be on the card, along with the Miesha Tate and Amanda Nunes fight. The main event will still be John Jones against Daniel Cormier for the unification bout. Now you have Lesnar against Hunt as the co-main event, and then rounding out the card will be Velasquez against Travis Browne. And this is a very interesting fight. And I know some people, some of my friends on Facebook, I got into arguments with them and whatnot, saying that this fight, regardless of who it was against, now we know it's Mark Hunt, but they were upset that it was the co-main event. And I'm not, because before he left the UFC, Brock Lesnar was the biggest pay-per-view draw in the organization. So why should it come as a surprise to anyone that the UFC would put him in the co-main event spot? Putting him first, thinking, oh, if you put him first, people will still pay, doesn't work. Because if people find out that he's first, they're not going to stick around for the 4 fights. They're not going to pay that $60. Because they're going to see that one fight first and go, oh, I don't want to watch this. Why would I pay $60 to watch the other 4 fights? But by putting him as the co-main event, you have to watch 3 other events before you get to him. And then chances are you'll probably stick around and just watch the main event at that point. You're going to buy the whole card. You're going to invest. There's a reason to spend your $60. But if he's placed first, yeah, you're not going to get that. Number 2, Brock Lesnar wouldn't accept being on anything other than the pay-per-view main card, and probably wouldn't accept anything other than being the co-main event, because you get pay-per-view points and stuff. Now, that's part of how they can compensate paying Brock Lesnar. And of course, for the UFC, you're going to make a lot of money. A lot of people are going to be interested in this. He's a huge draw, especially after this long return. You're going to maybe bring some people that haven't watched the UFC for a long time, maybe even since he left. So for the UFC, it's a great business move. Now, some people think maybe it alienates other people who deserve the shot and whatnot. I don't know. I don't think so, because this is not some freak show. This is not Dada 5000 or Ken Shamrock coming out of 10 years retirement, or Hoist Gracie or Tito versus Stephan Bonner. To me, it's not anything like what Bellator is doing. Or it's not even anything like the UFC has done in the past, bringing somebody like James Toney in to fight Randy Couture as a co-main event. I don't think it's anything like that. This guy is a former UFC heavyweight champion. Regardless of how long he has been out, that still is something. He's still done something for the organization. So while you may think he doesn't or does deserve it, the fact of the matter is he's a former champion, he's a polarizing figure, and he sells pay-per-views. So that's why he gets the co-main event spot. And the UFC, again, they were going to put Conor McGregor against Nate Diaz as the main event of this pay-per-view. So when you look at that and how this card's turned out, and now an actual title fight is the main event, having Brock Lesnar being the co-main event doesn't seem like that's crazy of an idea to me. It really doesn't. So put him on there. The more the merrier, really. I mean, it's UFC 200. You're trying to make this the biggest event in combat sports. So why not put, so far to date, the biggest draw combat sports has ever seen grace the octagon? And from that Brock Lesnar thing, that stems to Ariel Helwani. As fans may know, Ariel Helwani, during the UFC 199 pay-per-view was told that him and his crew from MMAfighting.com had to leave the forum and would be issued a lifetime ban and would no longer be able to cover UFC events. Well, at least as a member of the media. They could still buy tickets if they wanted to. But this is stemming from Ariel Helwani not just saying a rumor, confirming that Brock Lesnar was going to be at UFC 200. Sent out a tweet while covering the event. Apparently the UFC didn't like that. Him potentially spoiling them showing that 199 promo video of Brock Lesnar announcing his return. So the UFC, when I say UFC, I mainly say probably Dana White, maybe the Fertitta brothers, probably got upset, maybe a little angry that the tweet may have ruined the suspense a little bit, and decided to just pull him from the event and give him a lifetime ban. A lot of backlash has slayed from this. Ariel Helwani is arguably the most notable journalist covering the sport of mixed martial arts. And this does bring up a freedom of the press issue because he didn't say this was a rumor. He wasn't reporting false information. He wasn't slandering anybody. This was something he found out. He confirmed from multiple sources and sent out the information via tweet. Now, some people probably don't follow Ariel Helwani on Twitter. Some people don't know who he is. Some people don't care who he is. Some people don't care about that sort of thing. They only care about what they're seeing on the television. And I get that. I do. But this guy does a pretty good job. And he runs a podcast and runs a show. A lot of higher production value than this. But he does a good job. And he tries to do the best of his abilities. And I think also you got to factor in there was a situation earlier in the year with one of the reasons him leaving Fox Sports as an MMA analyst or / reporter was due to him reporting on some other information early. Again, just doing his job. But I think this kind of was a snowball thing. There was that thing whole earlier with Fox and the UFC. Now he did this. And I think this was a judgment call by the UFC to, first of all, ban him, which is pretty crazy to do in its own right to someone. And then have him leave during the event, not even finish the event out, which I think is also another reason for the outrage with people. They didn't even let him finish his job. And the two people that were with him, I believe that was Esther Lynn and E. Casey Laydon, if I pronounce his name correctly. He's a video journalist. Also were going to be banned just because they were in association with Ariel, which, again, that was wrong as well. And the UFC has finally decided to rethink their position today. It might have been Monday, actually. And has lifted the ban after talking over with SB Nation, which is the overall owner of the MMAfighting.com domain. And I'm glad it got resolved because, like I said, a freedom of press issue starts to come up, and this is not the first time the UFC has banned a reporter. It's just the fact it was somebody as notable as Ariel Helwani. Now, Josh Gross, who covers MMA for ESPN.com, is one of the more known reporters out there as well, and he hasn't been credentialed then for years. So it's one of those things where the UFC, if people haven't realized by now with their kind of the thing about putting Brock Lesnar as the co-main event and Conor McGregor and money and Ronda Rousey, they are running a dictatorship. This is not a democracy, the UFC. They do what they think is best, and if you don't like it, you can get out of the way, or they'll make you get out of the way. But if you play along by the rules, they'll take care of you. They'll reward you. They'll praise you. But if you do something against them and you cross them, or like Jacob Stitch-Duran, they will say bye-bye to you and find somebody else. It's as simple as that. Now, that might not be the ethical thing to do or the right thing to do or the nice thing to do, but the UFC doesn't care about that sort of thing. And this is one of the few times, again, when I say UFC, I mainly mean Dana White and the top brass, the Fertitta brothers, I think kind of got caught up in, getting mad, getting a little hot-headed and doing something a little rash. Came back to kind of bite them. People were upset about this and kind of had to come back with their tail between their legs and issued an apology. All right, some other news here to move on to. Rose Namajunas not getting a title shot, even though many, including myself, thought she earned it, defeating Tisha Torres earlier this year. But Dana White and kind of even Rose herself said that they would like to have one more fight for the former Ultimate Fighter runner-up, and that's what's going to happen. Is she's taking on another girl from Poland, not the champion, as I mentioned. Karolina Kowalkiewicz will take on Rose Namajunas, and that will be at UFC 201 in Atlanta, coming up at the end of July. And if Rose wins this one, to me, you really can't deny her getting a shot at the title. And I believe she was ranked number 4 according to the UFC before defeating Tisha Torres. So if she can beat Kowalkiewicz, that would be huge. And vice versa, if Karolina can get a win, that's a signature victory. I don't know necessarily if that puts her in title contention, considering that would be the only... well, I guess Randa Marcos might have been top 10, but obviously Heather Jo Clark was not in her win in the Netherlands not too long ago. So beating Rose definitely puts her on a very short list, and this is a very big-time fight, and I'm looking forward to it. That poster behind me, right there, that was the last fight the UFC had in Boston, the Cruz Dillashaw FS1 fight. And on that card, Matt Mitrione took on Travis Brown. And of course, if you don't remember that, Matt Mitrione suffered a couple eye pokes and obviously took a lot of hits to the face that suffered in a huge eye injury for Matt Mitrione. He was promptly cut after that event, has now signed with Bellator. He was trying to appeal the fight with the Massachusetts State Athletic Commission. However, to get the fight overturned to a no contest, citing that the referee didn't know kind of what was going, and also claimed that Gary Foreman, who was the referee, let's see, he wanted a conflict of interest, saying that Foreman followed too many of the fighters on social media, as well as being a proxy head of a regional fight promotion, and that Foreman used his job as a referee inside the octagon to promote his own business. However, the Massachusetts State Athletic Commission voted unanimously to uphold the loss to Matt Mitrione and opted against disciplining Foreman as well. And during the fight, I was there live and in person. Brown was never penalized for these eye pokes. And while Matt Mitrione was upset about it, I don't think the referee, while maybe not the best referee ever, didn't really do that bad a job. But I think more so, instead of penalizing Travis Brown, which he could have done, it definitely would have been justified. But I don't think he should have let the fight continue after that second eye poke. Matt Mitrione's eye was definitely gone, and I think that's maybe what Mitrione was looking at. I mean, he did call in the doctor. The doctor looked it over. I don't know. It was a weird situation. I'm not saying the referee should be completely unscathed in this situation, but I wouldn't be surprised if the commission doesn't have that guy ref any other bigger fights coming forward. I mean, that's not officially a statement, but that's something they should consider looking at. If the guy's really a promoter and not a referee, then they should look at getting better referees the next time the UFC or any other bigger organization comes to their state. Speaking of Bellator, one of their recent signees, Josh Koscheck, speaking of UFC cast-offs, once again, first he got hurt a couple of months ago when he was supposed to fight Paul Daley in his hometown of Fresno. Or, well, now hometown. He's originally from Pennsylvania. But then they were going to do it again in London, in Paul Daley's hometown. And what do you know? Josh Koscheck gets hurt again. However, it's still going to be a great fight, so don't worry, London fans, as Paul Daley will now take on former Bellator welterweight champion Douglas Lima. And this should be awesome. This is a fight I've wanted for pretty much since Paul Daley was signed with Bellator. And this is going to be excellent. I think you can make a case the winner does get a shot at the title. I know Fernando Gonzalez against Michael Page was supposed to be on there as well. I think Fernando Gonzalez got hurt, but Michael Page will still be on the card. And it should be pretty exciting. Now, of course, Lima was supposed to take on cheating Enjikawani at the Bellator card on June 17th, so obviously he's kind of moving back a little bit, but this is a much better fight, no offense to Enjikawani. So, very excited for that, and really looking forward to this Bellator card in London, which, despite this injury, of course, the biggest loss, and no pun intended there, Kimbo Slice, a.k.a. Kevin Ferguson, has passed away at the age of 42, and it looked as though he had reports from friends and family and coaches say that he really hadn't been feeling good those past couple weeks and went to the hospital. Apparently he needed a heart transplant. That wasn't able to happen in enough time for former UFC fighter and current Bellator fighter to stay alive, and this is a shame. Regardless of what happened with the day of the 5,000 and everything, the guy, by all accounts, was a good dude, a family man, a guy that tried to do the best that he could. I mean, got famous off of doing internet fights, which is pretty crazy when you kind of sit back and look about it, that at one point in time he was maybe the most known MMA fighter, and he hadn't fought anyone really legitimate and stuff like that. So he kind of ushered in a whole bunch of fans that maybe were never interested in mixed martial arts before, and kind of a generation of getting interested in fighting. Now, a lot of those fights he did, of course, were illegal in backyard and stuff, but it still brought people to the sport. It still got exposure. And it's sad to see him go, especially because Bellator had Jordan Parsons pass away a few weeks ago. That situation, obviously, a lot more tragic than this with Kimbo Slice. Of course, Muhammad Ali just lost his battle with Parkinson's. And, man, it's a shame. It's a shame to see people that have kind of moved the needle, and Jordan Parsons, a guy that was looking to move the needle eventually, a young man like that. So that was definitely shocking to see, for me, to see the passing of Kimbo Slice. So moving on, Jose Aldo, real quickly. Once again, there are rumors going around that he is hurt. But however, Jose Aldo has shot down those rumors, and he's been posting pics with Brazilian soccer player Thiago Silva, and he appears to be okay in his hands, so everything should be on track. But there were some rumors, I believe BJPen.com was one of those sites that reported, and also Sheerdog has an article about it as well. So hopefully that is true. Hopefully there are no injuries there to Jose Aldo, because guy's got hurt enough in his career, and he's delayed enough fights, and this is his chance to try to get back at Conor McGregor. Maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe McGregor doesn't ever return to 145 and actually defend his belt, but you don't know until you fight Frankie Edgar in that interim title fight at UFC 200. Looking at UFC 199 before we get to the main card, which is what I will cover in depth, got to mention Marco Polas Reyes took on, no, not the Dong Hun Kim who's fought for years at welterweight, the other Dong Hun Kim who fights at 155. Great fight, amazing fight. Ended up winning fight of the night, and Reyes was able to get past the Korean third round knockout. Tremendous fight. That was the first fight of the night on the Fight Pass. If you don't have Fight Pass, go and check this one out. Crazy. Could end up being a Fight of the Year candidate. It was that good. And unfortunately for Kim, had a lot of hype coming into this, but Polo Reyes was able to get the win, and big props to him. But of course, the loss doesn't hurt as much when you get that extra 50 grand bonus check as well. Next fight, you had the draw between Kevin Casey and Elvis Mutashik. Most people did not like that at all. Definitely an interesting fight. The other fight on Fight Pass. Also, a streak has ended. Sean Strickland, a guy who was undefeated for a while in the UFC, one of the brighter American prospects. He lost to Ponzinibbio back in 2015, taking on kind of almost his counterpart, but the British version in Tom Breeze, who a lot of people had a lot of hype on. His last fight, many people thought kind of didn't deliver when he took on Nakamura, after having all these knockouts and got a performance bonus in his win over Cathal Pendred. Then lost, had another fight go to decision, a guy not known for going decision, and loses a split decision to Sean Strickland there on the undercard for Sean Strickland to have his third win in a row, beating Igor Adauju, Alex Garcia, and now Tom Breeze. Sean Strickland has seemed to found a home here at 170 after starting his career at 185. Also on the undercard, incredible fight between Jessica Andrade and Jessica Penne. Of course, Andrade recently fought up 2 weight classes in the UFC women's bantamweight division, and it's crazy to think that she took on Jessica Penne, who used to fight at 105 pounds and was the first ever Invicta atomweight champion. And, you know, she tried her best, but it was going to be difficult to deal with that size there of Andrade. Just looking at the stats, 118 to 28 in total strikes landed, not to mention 206 thrown to just 92, and Penne 0 for 6 on her takedown attempts. I mean, there aren't going to be too many girls that big in this division, but Andrade is going to be one of them, and Penne was just going to, she was going to have a tough time in this one, really no matter what, unless Andrade gassed. But I mean, putting up those type of numbers in a fight that only went 256 into the second round, that's awfully impressive against a good quality opponent in Jessica Penne. And Andrade, she can keep that weight and do it fine without any causing serious problems. And of course, with the new 8% rule the UFC will be doing here, you got to be 8% entering fight week. Jessica Andrade could be a contender very soon in this division. Beneil Dariush returns to the winning track and hands James Vick his first loss ever, knocking out the Texecutioner there in the first round. A nice bounce-back win for Dariush after getting submitted in the second round by Michael Chiesa. And now overall in his UFC career, he's 7-2 and has won 6 out of his last 7 UFC fights. So even though James Vick is not as highly ranked as Michael Chiesa, he's still a big, strong, and very tough dude and powerful dude in this division. So still a big deal for Beneil to go in there and, again, like I said, hand Vick his first loss of his career and do so in emphatic fashion. Brian Ortega versus Clay Guida to end the FS1 prelims. Crazy fight between these two gentlemen. And Brian Ortega, most people think of just as a submission. And, of course, he had that great fight against Thiago Tavares last year, which you could have called Fight of the Year, and had a very similar type of performance in this matchup, knocking out Clay Guida right before the end of the third round with a huge jump knee, and was able to take out Clay Guida. And T-City adding another facet to his game, and just an overall incredible scrap by these two. And Brian Ortega, you know, I know Clay Guida's towards the end of his career, but beating a guy the caliber of Clay Guida says a lot for this young man, Brian Ortega, who has been nothing short of impressive since entering the octagon. And besides a no contest in his first ever UFC fight in July of 2014, he has won 3 fights in a row, and Thiago Tavares wasn't expected to win, knocks him out, fight of the night. Diego Brown, another fight, probably wasn't supposed to win, submits him third round. Clay Guida, probably another fight, most people couldn't think he'd win, knocks him out third round. T-City is definitely, I think, on the cusp of getting some top competition in this stacked featherweight division. I, for one, am looking forward to it. Getting to the main card of the night, Dustin Poirier against Bobby Green. Bobby Green had been out of action for about 18 months since his loss to Edson Barboza. And Bobby Green, you know, he normally has some good head movement, good footwork, is able to trap people, corner, cut angles and whatnot. And he wasn't really doing that. He was taunting. He was trying to throw hard shots. He was really just trying to move his head and get out of the way of Dustin Poirier. And Dustin Poirier just kind of kept coming forward, throwing straight combinations, throwing straight stuff. And Bobby Green, for a guy that had been such a long layoff, I'm not sure if you watched tape of Dustin Poirier, but since moving to 155, Dustin Poirier is legit. You got to respect this guy's power in this division. He can throw a lot harder and put a lot more output on you, not having to cut those extra 10 pounds. And Bobby Green, you know, you've been off for a long time and you're facing a legit guy. You got to show him some respect. And Bobby Green was not showing the Diamond any respect. And I just don't think that was the right game plan with your hands down like that and moving your head. Poirier is a very precise striker. He doesn't throw a lot of looping shots or crazy hooks or overhand or really do anything crazy like that. He comes right at you, he moves forward, and he throws hard in this division. And if you're going to keep your head down and bounce around, you're going to get caught eventually. You're not going to be able to dodge all of them. And that's kind of what happened in this fight, is Poirier was finally able to land a couple in a row and then put Bobby Green away in the first round. And this is a big win for Dustin Poirier. Not as big as Bobby Green wasn't coming off a layoff. I think that hurts Poirier a little bit in terms of, like, if you really look how good that victory is, but he's going to get a top 10 opponent in his next fight. I think he has to. Who that is, I don't know, but it's going to be someone big. I know Beneil Dariush just won on this card. I think that would be a tremendous opponent for Dustin Poirier, considering Dariush's jiu-jitsu skills. That would be a huge test for Dustin Poirier. We'll see, though. We'll see what happens. Michael Johnson's another guy. I think that would be a good matchup for Dustin Poirier, but he keeps on knocking out dudes in the first round. He's going to make some waves in a division that's always stacked. Dan Henderson against Hector Lombard for the next fight of the evening. And this one kind of went how I thought it would. Two dudes that like to hit hard, and was just going to see who could fall first. And in the first round, Henderson definitely got tagged several times and looked out of it a couple of times. But Henderson was able to survive despite getting taken down twice and outstruck 42-15 in that first round. In the second round, I think Lombard was really looking to do more of the same, and Dan Henderson, to his credit, threw a head kick, which you think, well, why would you say to his credit? Why was that a good thing? Because people don't expect Dan Henderson to throw a head kick. If Dan Henderson throws a kick, it's typically leg kicks. So throwing that head kick completely took Hector Lombard, I think, out of it. I don't think he saw that coming. I don't think he ever thought Dan Henderson would try a head kick. So he does a head kick, doesn't land completely flush, but it lands enough to land and have Hector Lombard kind of catch it. And in that instance, Dan Henderson just kind of throws a weird back elbow towards the head of Hector Lombard. Kind of looked like hit the forearm a little bit there. Drops Lombard. And then Dan Henderson, a la his fight against Michael Bisping at UFC 200, threw a couple of those huge elbows there. Threw one that landed amazingly solid to completely knock out cold the man from Cuba and get another knockout victory inside the octagon in the second round at the 127 marker. And he didn't officially announce that he would retire, but it kind of did sound like a retirement. I mean, he was just a few miles away from his hometown there in Temecula, California. He said it's the first time his whole entire family, his wife, and all of his kids were able to see him fight live and in person, and kind of going out like that, you know, basically hometown Southern California, family, friends, beating a guy the caliber of Hector Lombard, you know, coming back from the brink of defeat to defeat someone. It's not too many better endings than that for a man who's accomplished so much in his sport, and I wouldn't blame him if he decided to call it a career. I said this on Twitter during the event. I think there's only one fight left for Dan Henderson if he does decide to fight, and I think that's a rematch with Anderson Silva. And that's a fight he's wanted for a very long time, and I think with Silva now towards the end of his career as well, I know he has the whole gallbladder recovery surgery thing going on, but I think if the UFC offered him Anderson Silva, I think Henderson might take it. I know this would be a great moment to go out on, but I think when Dan Henderson looks back in his career, that's definitely, I think, one fight he would like to do over again. And if he got the chance, I think he would take a fight against Anderson Silva again. Next fight of the evening, featherweight division, as Max Holloway took on Ricardo Lamas. And one guy say, Max Holloway, might be the best fighter that isn't the champion in this division. Yeah, I said it. He completely schooled Ricardo Lamas. Ricardo Lamas didn't even look this bad against Jose Aldo in his title shot. This was a complete and utter domination by Max Holloway. And Ricardo Lamas just had no answer for Max Holloway. He couldn't get inside at all. I mean, he landed a few nice right hands, but couldn't get the fight to the ground where he would have an advantage if he got it there, but he couldn't. 0 of 6 in his takedowns, and there was literally just nothing he could do to stop Max Holloway. He had no answer. He had no solution. He had no plan A, plan B, plan C. None of those worked, and he kind of just had to hang in there tough for 15 minutes. And add in the fact that Max Holloway, the last 10 seconds, say, oh, you want to bang? Let's go. And decided to just tee off with him and Lamas in the last 10 seconds, despite being up in this fight considerably. It adds on to his winning streak of having the longest winning streak without receiving a shot at a UFC championship. And many thought if Jose Aldo is indeed hurt, Max Holloway should be the guy to get the call. And if that does happen, I hope that is the case, because Max Holloway has definitely deserved it. I mean, he was ranked number 4 coming into this fight, beats the number 5 guy, and beats him badly. The only other fight besides a shot at the World Championship to me is Chad Mendes, because he's beaten everybody else that's worth anything in this division. And anyone else would kind of be too low for him to take a risk. Well, maybe Charles Oliveira, because of course that win was kind of weird. He had that fluke, weird shoulder esophagus injury that Oliveira had. I would consider that a possibility, depending on how things shake out with this division, because what's supposed to happen is the winner of Jose Aldo and Frankie Edgar fights Conor McGregor later this year. If that all happens with no injuries and other weird stuff, and it goes as planned for the UFC, that means Max Holloway would have to wait until, I'm going to say March or April of next year. Because, of course, the interim title fight's taking place in July. Conor McGregor is scheduled to fight Nate Diaz in August at UFC 202. That would put potentially the Frankie Aldo winner against Conor McGregor sometime in December, I would guess. Maybe November. But either way, you're looking then still March, April at the earliest in 2017. Now, we're already in June 2016. Does Max Holloway, a guy who said he didn't like waiting that long to get this fight here against Ricardo Lamas, is that guy going to sit on the shelf for 9 months? I don't think so. So he's going to have to take somebody on in the meantime. And to me, those are, he might even fight twice in those 9 months, to be completely honest. So I think it's either Chad Mendes or Oliveira. I really think those are the only 2 options, because he's beaten everybody else and he's making him look bad, especially this fight and even the Cub Swanson fight. Co-main event of the evening, Dominick Cruz against Uriah Faber. After a pretty competitive first round, which saw Cruz just edge Faber in striking 19-15, both men were actually able to land a takedown. There were some nice grappling exchanges around. I think I would have gave Faber. He landed some nice right hands in that round. Dominick Cruz just took over and just absolutely picked apart Uriah Faber and outstruck him 23-6 in round 2, 21-10 round 3, 18-7 round 4, and 18-11 in round 5. And in those remaining 4 rounds, mixed in 2 takedowns. However, those were both in the 5th round. Faber did a good job of stopping the takedown overall, 3 of 7. Faber wasn't able to do much on the ground where he may have had an advantage, 1 of 6 in his takedown, but just couldn't land. And because he couldn't land, he was apprehensive to throw the trigger, as shown by the total number of strikes. 99 of 275 landed for Dominick Cruz, just 49 of 174 for Faber. Now, while 99 of 275 is not a very great percentage, it really isn't. So realistically, Faber did a good job as well of not getting hit, just not as well as Dominick Cruz. And Cruz definitely landed enough, and to me, really, it was that second round that was the turning point of this round. After what I said, a very competitive first round, the second round, Cruz was able to land a straight left, dropped Faber. Faber kind of looked rocked, and really, to me, never recovered from that left hand in round 2. There were a couple other times that left hand landed. Nothing to the effect of round 2, but he took him completely out of his game, and trying to recover and catch Dominic Cruz while kind of being a little glassy-eyed and, a little hurt and banged up. Maybe your head's not thinking clearly. You're not going to be able to accomplish that. And Dominic Cruz proved, if there was any doubt, that he is the best 135-pound fighter in the world. And for Uriah Faber, this fight took place, this trilogy fight, I should say, back when it was supposed to happen in 2012, a year after that very close second fight. I think things would have been different, legitimately. But, at 37 years old, as quick as Faber's been in his career, he's not as quick as he once was. And he tried his best. Dominic Cruz he's a matchup nightmare. He's arguably the hardest guy to prepare for in any division. Hardest guy to emulate. And short of, a lucky punch, that might be the only way and him getting injured, might be the only way anyone ends up beating him for a very long time. We'll see. Of course, a looming matchup with TJ Dillashaw. Of course, you have guys like John Dodson coming to their fruition. You never know, another matchup there with Mighty Mouse. Asunciao's lurking. There's some matchups for Cruz that I think definitely make interesting fights, but, Uriah Faber, as much as I kind of wanted him to win and go out a champion, much like Dan Henderson, I think he may call it a career as well. And unlike Dan Henderson, I don't think there's really anything left for him. I don't think there's any matchup really that would be worthwhile for Uriah Faber, realistically. And he had a great career. He's a pioneer of the sport for the lighter weight classes, was a former champion in the WEC, will someday sure be in the UFC Hall of Fame. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get in at some point in time. And, I think he kind of was mentioning Cody Garbrandt a few times. I think it's time to him step aside, be a coach, be a mentor, which he's already kind of been doing for the last several years, but kind of do that full time. And he can still have a role in the UFC, potentially, but he had a great career. He's 37 years old. There's really not much. I mean, he didn't get the UFC championship. A lot of guys don't get the UFC championship. That doesn't mean he didn't have a good career, wasn't a good fighter, didn't beat quality opponents. It's just that couldn't get it. That just happens to some guys. Speaking of guys that have been waiting to get a title shot and trying to claim a championship, well, that's what Michael Bisping was able to do. Is it took him 10 years to fight for a UFC championship, and he finally got the chance here at UFC 199. And not only did he capture the UFC middleweight championship, he also avenged his loss to Luke Rockhold in November of 2014, knocking out the Californian in the first round. And really, this was kind of a close fight, really. I mean, Luke Rockhold was landing some nice kicks. I thought kind of was pressuring Bisping. Bisping was doing better with the punches, but then it was one of those punches, that left hand, that was able to catch Luke Rockhold off guard, and Bisping was able to put him away. Bisping not known for knocking guys out in the first round, but he said this in the post-fight press conference, that he noticed when Luke throws a lot of those kicks, he kind of drops his hands a lot. He kind of drops that backhand, and thought if he could counter that, he could catch Luke Rockhold. That's something he missed in their first matchup when Luke caught him in that choke. And he was right. He found the hole in Rockhold's game, that no one has really found out other short of that just crazy wheel kick by Vitor Belfort. He was able to find the hole, exploit it, and finish Luke Rockhold. And this is one of the few times in UFC history, a matchup that I hope does get a trilogy. Now that's 1-1, both guys, because both guys have finished each other. And in there aren't too many fights that could be potentially trilogies or end up being a trilogy where both guys have a finish over one another. You don't really see that too often. Really, you see one guy get finishes, the other guy may get a decision. So I think you add that in, and with that trash talk, I mean, if you go on the UFC's website and check out the post-fight video press conference, they're still going at it, just like they were before the fight. You almost didn't even know that a fight took place, kind of. And I'll admit, I took on the picks of the show. I said, other than like a lucky punch or crazy fluke injury, that's the only way I see Michael Bisping winning. But I'm pretty sure those were my exact words, and that's what happened. He got that lucky punch. He finished the fight in the first round. He took the fight on short notice. He deserved this. He deserves to be the UFC champion. And, you know, as much as I've kind of hated Michael Bisping over the career, mainly because of his personality, not because of his work ethic or ability to perform as a mixed martial artist, but he's starting to kind of grow on me these last couple of years, and I gotta hand it to the guy. He did it. I didn't think he could do it after those couple of years of failing to get you know, those #1 contender wins to get the title shot. You know, he gets one on an injury replacement, a couple weeks notice, and beats a guy who I thought was at the top of his game and definitely one of the top fighters in the world, and he defeated him. Now, what's next here for Michael Bisping? Of course, I think a trilogy fight will happen with Luke Rockhold at some point in time. I think it has to, and it should be awesome. But more likely, I think Jacare should get the next shot. I think he deserved that after his domination of Vitor Belfort at UFC 198. And of course, neither Bisping nor Rockhold has defeated Vitor Belfort. So I think that should say for something. And also, it's a great matchup. You have a guy who's a tremendous submission specialist in Jacare against a very good striker and a guy with a great cardio machine in Michael Bisping. And that's a perfect title fight. I think we potentially will see the rematch that we're going to see here at 199. I think potentially we see a Rockhold Weidman 2, but we see that in the non-title affair. Either, you know, co-headlining a pay-per-view or, you know, headlining a Fox card or something like that. I think that's could be very likely. Of course, Rockhold did mention he had a MCL tear coming into this fight, so I'm sure he'll have to get that taken care of. So I don't know how long that will sideline Mr. Rockhold. And of course, Weidman's going to be battling some injuries, so that could delay things on there. Also, the status of Romero, and of course the win he had over Jacare being somewhat suspect with performance-enhancing drugs and all that stuff. So Romero is kind of a wild card there in the division. Of course, we got Derek Brunson against Gegard Mousasi, the winner of that. Maybe not playing into a title shot, but in terms of maybe what's next for Rockhold. But I think Jacare deserves the shot there. And I think Rockhold probably gets one more fight in. If he wins it, he probably takes on the winner of Jacare and Bisping. Of course, got to see the trilogy fight with Bisping. He holds a win over Jacare. So even though he got knocked out in the first round, he's still very much in the picture here at 185. And again, congrats to Michael Bisping on finally being able to do it and prove myself and a lot of other people wrong that, first of all, that he could get a shot at the UFC title and let alone win the UFC title. Well, that about does it for me here on the show. Of course, just a few seconds here, you'll hear my interview with up-and-coming mixed martial artist and kickboxer Brooke Mayo. But before I go, I'd like to thank our partners at MMA Fight Club. Of course, running the Facebook blog there, facebook.com/MMA Fight Club, and they've launched their new website, I believe, MMAFightClub.net, so check that out as well. MMAforlife.ca, MMAinsider.net. Of course, AJ Hiller at MMASignaturesUSA.com. I believe he's getting in some Pat Barry and Rose Namajunas stuff. Speaking of, we spoke about Rose, I should say, and we did speak to Rose before a fight against Paige Van Zandt. So that's an old interview you want to check out, anyways. But he's getting in some stuff there. Pat Barry and Rose Namajunas, if you're looking for any stuff of hers. So once again, I'm your host, Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. I'm also on Instagram at the Jim Gramm. And I appreciate everybody listening to the program. For more on Beyond the Cage, go like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. And if you haven't already, we're trying to get to 500 likes and do a contest, give away some fantastic signed memorabilia and other sorted mixed martial arts items. We're at 470 likes, so we're just 30 likes away. So if you haven't already liked our page, go to it, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. So once again, I am Jim Gramm, and thank you for watching, and stay tuned for my interview with Brooke Mayo. And once again, thanks for supporting Beyond the Cage. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I have a special guest joining me. She is Brooke Mayo, competing in mixed martial arts and Muay Thai kickboxing, 7-2 as an amateur MMA fighter and 4-0 in Muay Thai. Joining me, Jim Graham, here on Beyond the Cage. And Brooke, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, I want to get to your last fight in MMA. That was at GKO 6, and you were able to submit Megan Little just 45 seconds into the first round. And I have to say that was an awfully impressive performance. And coming into that fight, did you expect to win that quickly, basically?
I did not. Like, I was watching a lot of her previous fights, and I knew that she had a couple, like, in 2011, 2012, and that was well before I started training at all. So I was expecting her to be a tough fight, and I knew she liked to brawl, and she was really tough. So, and I know she had a couple of TKOs and maybe a knockout even. So I was thinking it was going to be like, you always prepare for the worst, like a 3-round, like all-out war. So when, when I had the opportunity for the takedown, it was kind of nice, it presented itself like right away. So I was really happy about that,
Absolutely. And if fans go on and find the video on YouTube like I did, they'll notice a familiar face in the cage with you, that being Herb Dean. And how cool is it to have Herb Dean ref one of your fights? That's got to make you feel kind of extra special, right?
Yeah, that's been a really neat experience. He also refed one of my previous fights as well. And then we also got to have Stitch Duran and Jesse G as Cutman. So that was really cool as well. Like, I felt like, you're getting the full-on, VIP treatment there.
Now, as I mentioned there in the intro, you also compete in Muay Thai. When was your last Muay Thai fight?
My last Muay Thai fight, I believe, was sorry, I'm fighting a lot this year. I think February, I want to say. That was an IKF title contention fight. So my next Muay Thai fight will be a title fight at the end of this month, hopefully, if we can find somebody for that. So we're still, I think, trying to finalize an opponent.
Now, I wanted to kind of stick with that for just a second here, Brooke. And, of course, Glory, which is most people consider the #1 kickboxing organization in the world, they actually just opened for the first time a women's division, and right now are running a women's Grand Prix to determine their first ever women's champion, which is right around your current weight class there at 125 pounds. So is that something that maybe in your future, if you keep on winning, maybe you get a call from Glory or you call Glory to fight for them now that they open their ranks?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I would really want to go pro in both MMA and kickboxing. I think that would be the most ideal situation for me. I like to fight frequently, and sometimes with MMA or just doing one or the other, you only may fight twice a year or something like that. And I'd want to fight as frequently as possible to keep me, in shape and always ready. So that'd be awesome. I just need to, I want to have a few more amateur fights to clean up my my technique a little bit. But I think, by the looks of how things are going, that's kind of what I'm going to be leaning towards.
Do you think the fact that recently Glory and Invicta are going to be sharing the services of Tiffany Van Soest in kickboxing and MMA, do you think that will help paving the way for you, maybe doing something very similar in the near future?
Yeah, definitely. Like, seeing, athletes like Tiffany be able to jump back and forth between both, that definitely helps, other women like me who also, are interested in choosing that path. So if it proves to work out for her, then I think they're going to be, more opportunities for, more women to be kind of more versatile and jumping back and forth between kickboxing and MMA. So that'd be really cool.
So you mentioned, obviously, you're looking to get your next Muay Thai fight as well, but when would your next MMA fight would probably be sometime after that then?
Yeah, I think we're looking at another MMA fight in August, and then after getting maybe 1 or 2 kickboxing fights in.
Now, what got you started in martial arts? Is this a recent development for you, or have you been doing this sort of thing since you were a kid?
It's relatively recent. I actually played soccer ever since I was 5, and I went to college for soccer. So that was my primary focus for, pretty much my whole life. And what happened was soccer didn't exactly work out. I kept getting injury after injury, and it just, it was just hard for me to continue on. So after that, I was kind of like, I guess I was kind of bored. I didn't have anything, workout wise to do. So I started doing yoga. I started trying Pilates and things like that. It wasn't, I guess, as competitive as I wanted it to be. So I was like looking for something to compete in, and my friend told me to try jiu-jitsu, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. So I just kind of walked into a jiu-jitsu gym, like not really knowing what to expect. And then after like my first class, then I was like instantly hooked on it. So I would show up there like, twice a day sometimes even like 3 times a day if I could sneak in another workout. And then I just couldn't stop training.
Now, how long have you been doing this as far as competing in the ring or a cage, at least amateur-wise?
2 years. I've been competing in MMA. I think we're going on my 2nd year now, but I started in a gi, so I started gi jiu-jitsu like almost 3 years ago now, coming up on 3 years in August.
And when you decided to actually compete, not just simply train in it, what did your friends and family think? Did they think you were crazy, or?
Well, my friends weren't really surprised. My family, on the other hand, was. I had told my mom that I was going to club soccer practices when really I was at jiu-jitsu and MMA practice. So when I finally told her, I had decided to start competing and I had a fight, she wasn't exactly happy about it. But after a while, after the first couple of fights, then I think she realized, if this was kind of MMA and jiu-jitsu and like kickboxing were here to stay, and that was like something that I was really committed to. But at first, I think she was freaked out by the idea of me getting in a cage and, or a ring and trying to fight somebody else.
Now, do you still have a regular day job? And if you do, how is it hard to find that balance between getting in a good workout and also trying to pay the bills?
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting trying to balance it all out. I currently coach 3 competitive soccer teams, and then I also am a part-time flight attendant. So it's definitely interesting. Like for my flight attendant job, we currently charter the San Jose Sharks to their away games. So like I'd flown to Canada for a couple days. We'd gone kind of like all over the country. So when we were doing that, I would kind of just find a gym or Yelp a gym to go and train at while we're on the road in the mornings, and then get my workouts in that way. But it was definitely kind of, an interesting experience trying to like figure out how to get my training done on the road in unfamiliar, territory. But I definitely found ways to get it done.
Now, speaking of the Sharks, of course, they're in the Stanley Cup final for the first time in team history. So that's got to be pretty exciting considering your link to the organization.
Yeah, no, it is. It's definitely exciting because, you start to get to know the players, on a slightly personal level. So when you see them playing, you're like, oh, like, go Wardo, go like Hurdle, you know what I mean? So when I watch the games, it's kind of cool. I really like Brett Birds as well. And his kids also train jiu-jitsu, so it's kind of fun, like on flights, to talk to him a little bit about training and MMA. So definitely a fun group of guys for sure.
So of course you're hopeful that they win the cup and bring it back to California, and maybe you'll get to have a picture with it, right? That's always a cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That'd be really cool.
Is there, like you said, you like to compete in mixed martial arts and kickboxing. is there one you like better than the other, or is it just simply you like to compete and both these two things help you do that?
To be honest, I really like MMA. I also like competing in jiu-jitsu. Kickboxing I enjoy, but it's kind of been like I've kickboxing for me doesn't feel like it comes as naturally. People tell me like I'm doing well at it, but sometimes I'm like it's hard for me to want to train just straight kickboxing or just straight striking because I'm more like grappling minded. But it's one of those things where I just keep working at it, and it's the one martial art that I haven't had as much experience in. So I think like as time goes on, I'm gonna get a little bit more confident with it and start to enjoy it a little bit more. But yeah, Dan Black has definitely pushed me to try new things and to get out of my comfort zone, and that's definitely taken my MMA to the next level. So I'm really appreciative that he encouraged me to pursue kickboxing. But like I said, I'm always trying to like go and sneak in more jiu-jitsu, and he's trying to pull me back to striking. So it's kind of funny.
Would you ever consider grappling in one of the Naga tournaments that they have throughout the country or something like that, or like I think they're still around, like a Metamoris type deal?
Yeah. I'm definitely interested in doing, things like that. I actually recently just had a super fight last weekend in a gi, but I'm looking to, maybe do some more, no-gi super fights because I think that's, that would definitely help out my MMA career as well, going up against the best no-gi grapplers or gi grapplers or, just even fighting the best kickboxers. Those things definitely help me when I go, transition back over to MMA. Because it's like if you're able to compete with the best of the best in each individual martial art and, succeed and win, then when you go back to MMA and you fight people that maybe aren't as well versed in each of those categories, it makes it a lot, easier on you.
All right, Brooke, I'll get you out of here with this. Of course, as people may know, the latest Ninja Turtles movie has hit the theaters this past weekend, and I was wondering, who is your favorite Ninja Turtle?
Ooh, I would have to say I like Leonardo. See, because I love blue. That's like my favorite color. So I'm like, that's kind of why I like him, but haven't watched too much Ninja Turtles as of lately. Haven't been babysitting as much, basically. That's what the kids love to watch when I go babysit them.
All right, she is Brooke Mayo. You can follow her on Instagram at bmail1313. And Brooke, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And good luck on your next fight, MMA or kickboxing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Once again, that was up-and-coming MMA and kickboxer Brooke Mayo, and you heard her right here on Beyond the Cage. Once again, this will end this week's show. For earlier in the show, if you want more information, visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/BeyondTheCagePodcast. I am your host, Jim Gramm. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Gramm. And thanks again for tuning in right here on YouTube for another edition of Beyond the Cage.